everybody. In this video, you will be learning about the Parse Method, Convert class, and the Typeforce Method in C#. So the agenda of my video will be understanding about the differences between Parse Method, Convert class, and Typeforce Method. So let's get straight into it. First, I'm going to talk about the Parse Method. So the Parse method is basically used to convert a string representation of a number to its integral equivalent data type. So the syntax for declaring a parse method is first the target type, that is integer in our case. So int dot parse brackets and the variable name that you want to parse. So let's look at an example. Here, I'm declaring a string and assigning it the value of 100. And then I'm declaring an integer and I'm parsing the string. So int.parse. And value 1 is this variable name. So that is how you can create a parse method. So now we're going to talk about some more details about the parse method. So if the string value is null, then it throws an argument null exception. So here I'm assigning the value null to a string and then I'm trying to parse that string. Here I'm creating an integer and trying to parse that string. So at compile time there will be no error, but at runtime there is going to be an error. Okay, so if the string value is a non-integer value, then it throws a format exception. For example, here I've declared a string and assigned it the value akshat. So that's not a numeric value and that's not what an integer can hold. So then I'm declaring an integer and assigning it, I'm parsing this string variable. So again, there will be no error at compile time, but there will be an error at runtime. Okay, so if the string is a number that is lesser than the minimum value or greater than the maximum value, then it throws an overflow exception. For example, here I'm declaring a string and assigning it the value of 256. And then I'm declaring a byte variable and trying to parse the string. So of course, a byte can store a value only from 0 to 255. So it cannot hold a value of 256. So that is an overflow exception. So there will be again no error at compile time, but there will be an error at runtime. So I'm going to show you that in the Visual Studio Lab. So now let's move on to the Convert class. Okay, so let's start talking about the Convert class. So the Convert class is also used to convert a string representation of a number to its integral equivalent data type. So this is also used kind of same like the parse method to convert a string to its integral equivalent data type. So what happens is this internally calls the parse method. I've already explained about the parse method. So the syntax for declaring a convert class is convert dot the target type, the .NET framework type. If you just type in to int, then you'll get an error. You have to type in the .NET framework type. So that is int32. And then, like I was saying, you have to start a bracket, and then inside that bracket you have to type in the variable name that you want to convert. Okay, so let's look at an example. So here I'm declaring a string and then I'm assigning it the value of 100. Then I declare an integer and then I'm converting the string to an integer. So convert that to int32 value 1, that is our string's name. So the result, of course, is going to be 100. Okay, so if the string value is null, then it returns 0. For example, here I'm declaring a string and its value is null. And then I'm declaring an integer and converting this string to an integer. So the value of this result variable is going to be 0. So if the string is a non-integer value, then it throws a format exception. For example, here I'm declaring a string and assigning it the value of akshat. So that's again not a numeric value and that's not what a string can hold. An integer can hold. So after that, I'm declaring an integer and converting this string to this integer. So there will be no error at compile time, but there's going to be an error at runtime. Okay, so if the string value is a number that is lesser than the minimum value or greater than the maximum value, then it throws an overflow exception. So for example, here I'm declaring a string and assigning it the value of 256, and then I'm creating a byte and then converting the string to it. So converting the string to a byte. Of course, a byte cannot store the value of 256. It can only store the value of 0 to 255. Okay, so the only difference between the convert class and the parse method is that if the string value is null, for the convert class it returns 0, but as for the parse method, if the string value is null, then it throws an argument null exception. Okay, so in between these both, it's safer to use the convert class, because if the string value is null, then the parse method will throw an argument null exception, and your program will have an unhandle exception and it's going to terminate. So we use the parse method when we are 100% sure that the string value is not going to be null. So now let's move on to the next way of converting a string to an integer, that is the TryParse method. Okay, so like I said, we're going to be talking about the TryParse method. So the Typeforce method is also used to convert a string representation of a number to its integral equivalent data type, like I've already said. So if the integer has parsed successfully, then it returns true and sets the integer value in the out parameter. And if the integer parsing is unsuccessful, then it returns false and sets the integer value in the out parameter to 0. That is the default value of an integer. So the TryParse method again is used to convert a string to an integral type. In our example, we are trying to convert a string to an integer. So what I mean is that if the string has been parsed successfully to an integer, then it returns true and sets the integer value in the out parameter. But if the string is unsuccessfully parsed to an integer, then it returns false and sets the integer value in the out parameter to 0 again, that is the default value of an integer. So the syntax for declaring a TryParse method is first the target type, that is integer in our case, dot TryParse, and the TryParse method will take in two arguments, that are the string, that is the source type, and that is what we have to convert to an integer. So the string variable name, and then it takes the out parameter. So what the out parameter does is that it stores the converted value. So the TryParse method returns a bool value depending on if the conversion was successful or unsuccessful. If the conversion was successful, then it returns a true value, and if it was not successful, then it returns false. That is why we have a bool variable here and assigning the TryParse method to it. Okay, so now let's take a look at some scenarios where we use the TryParse method. So the first scenario, you can just think of if you're trying to convert a string to an integer and the string value is null. Okay, so here I declare a TypeFirst method. Again, to declare a TypeFirst method, first target type. So in our example, it's an integer. Dot TypeFirst brackets, and again the TypeFirst method takes in two parameters. The first is the string that we want to convert, and that is the source, and then the out parameter, so where we should store the converted value. So here our string variable is this string that is assigned the value of null. So that is value 1, that's its name. And then our out parameter is this result variable. So again, it returns a boolean value that is true or false depending on the conversion, that was if it was successful or unsuccessful. So again, that is why we have a boolean variable and we have assigned the TryParse method to it. So in this case, it will return false and the out parameter, that is the results value, is going to be 0. Okay, so I hope you understood that scenario. Now let's talk about the next scenario. So if the string value is a non-integer value, then the out variable has 0. So here again, I declare a TryParse method and I pass two parameters to it. So that are value 1 and this out parameter, that is result. Of course, the out variable, that is an integer, cannot hold a value if it's not numeric. So this string is being assigned the value of action, and of course an integer cannot hold that value. So it will return false and the result will be 0. Okay, so the integer is being assigned the value of 0 because that is the default value of an integer, and that gets assigned 0 if it is not possible to convert. Okay, so now let's talk about the next scenario. That is, if the string value is a number that is less than the minimum value or greater than the maximum value, then the out variable has 0. So here again, I declare a TryParse method. I'm using byte instead of integer. So byte.TryParse, and our string variable is value 1 that has the value of 256. And of course, a byte cannot store that value. Then our out variable is a byte result. So it returns false and the result is 0. Again, it is the default value of a byte. 0. It's the default value of a byte. Okay. So now we're going to do the Visual Studio demo. So I'm just going to fire up Visual Studio. Okay, so here I fired up Visual Studio and I've created a console application. So what I'll do first is I'm going to show you an example by using the current Parse method. So before doing that, I'm going to show you if we can convert a string to an integer implicitly or explicitly. So here I'm going to declare a string that is called, let's see, value 1. Then I'm going to assign this value of 100, semicolon. Then I'm going to declare an integer. Int. I'm going to name this result equal to this value 1. So I'm going to copy that and paste that here, semicolon. So you can see that at compile time itself we get an error. So the error is cannot implicitly convert type string to integer. So now let's try the same thing explicitly. So okay, integer. Again, there is an error. It says cast is redundant and cannot implicitly convert type string to integer. So we're doing this explicitly, but still it says that cannot convert type string to integer. So let's look at how we can convert this. Now I'm going to use the parse method. So to do that, I'm going to type in int dot parse. Then start up a bracket and end that off in here. Now I'm going to write on the console what is the value of this integer. So console.writeLine is result variable. So I'll just click tab, result. That and paste that in here. Now let's go ahead and run our program. On the console, I get printed 100. So that is the value of our integer. So we're successfully able to convert the string to an integer. So now I'm just going to close this and try to make the string value as null. So let's see what's the output. So instead of 100, I'm going to type in null. Okay, so there's no error at compile time, but there's going to be an error at runtime. So I'm just going to go ahead and run our program. So it says me that there is an unhandled exception. So it says system.argument no exception. Value cannot be null. Okay, so we got an error at runtime, not at compile time. So that has proven that with the parse method, we cannot really work with null values. Now let's go ahead and try the next example. So I'm just going to close this. I'm going to make this value of the string as a string value, not a numeric one, string value. So let's see, active. So there will be no error at compile time. There will be an error at runtime. So I'm going to go ahead and run our program. So it says that there is an unhandled exception, that is system.format exception. I've already talked about format exception. So it says that the input string was not in a correct format. Okay, so now we'll see the example of what happens when we assign the string a value that is lesser than the minimum value or greater than the maximum value. So for better understanding, I'm going to make this integer to a byte. And then this should be byte.parse. Okay. And instead of octet, I'm going to type in 256. So that's not in the range of a byte. So again, there is an unhandled exception. It's system.overflow exception. So it says that value is either too large or too small for an unassigned byte. So now let's try giving this a value that is lesser than the minimum value of a byte. So I'm going to type in minus 256, or just to make things simpler, minus 1 on my program. So again, unhandled exception, system.overflow exception. Okay, so now we can conclude that using the parse method, we cannot really work with null values, non-numeric values, and if there's an overflow also. Now we're going to try out the convert class. So I'm just going to close that. So now instead of byte.parse, I'm going to type in convert that the target type to int 32. Okay. And then I want to change this byte again to an integer. So now instead of -1, I'm just going to assign this 100 back in. Okay, so now let's go ahead and run our program. So the result is 100. Now let's try so now it is proven that we can even use the convert class, not only the parse method, for converting a string to an integer. So now I'm going to make this a null value instead of 100. Null. Okay, on our program. So the result is 0. So now it is proven that by using the parse method, you'll get an argument null exception if the string value is a null. And by using the convert class, you can assign the string the value of null, but it's just that the value of the variable will just take in the default value of the target type. Okay, So now I'm going to show you an example. So here, instead of now, I'm going to type in a non-numeric value. Let's see, object, and then on our program. So there is an unhandled exception, that is system.format exception. So the same was for the parse method also. So now we're going to look at another scenario. That is, if we assign the string a value that is greater than the minimum value or lesser than the minimum value or greater than the maximum value. So again, I'm going to make this into a byte and not convert that to int32, convert that to byte. And instead of object, I'm going to type into 6. So that's again not in the range of a byte. So there's no error compulsion, but let's run it. There is an unhandled exception, that is system.also exception. So this has proven that the only difference between the convert class and the parse method is that if the string value is null, then for a convert class, it's only that it will take the default value of the target type. And as for the parse method, you'll get a system, you'll get the argument null exception. Okay, so now I hope you're clear about convert class and parse method. Now let's go ahead and talk about the Typeforce method. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to make this from convert that to byte dot Triforce. Okay, and this should not be a byte because its return type is a boolean, the Triforce methods. After that, I'm going to declare a byte variable here. Byte age, I think, age semicolon. And this takes in only two. This takes in two parameters. So we have only passed one. So out age. Okay. So I'm gonna print on the console not only this results, but even this age, the value of age. Okay, so I'm gonna do this in a more neat kind of way. So first, string is the is it parsed successfully. Question mark, then placeholder for our variable. Okay, just like that. And this here, I'm gonna type in converted value. Converted value colon placeholder 0. Okay. So now we're going to go ahead and run our program. So control plus F5. So is it parsed successfully? It is false. And the converted value is 0. It returns false because there is a variable overflow here. So a byte cannot hold, of course, the value of 256. And it can only hold a value from 0 to 255. So that's why we got it false, and that the value of this byte variable is 0 because that is the default value for a byte. Okay, so now we're going to look at another example. So instead of 256, I'm going to change this to 100. So now we're going to again run our program. So is it parsed successful? It is true, and the converted value is 100. So there's nothing wrong. 100 can be 100 is in the range of a byte, and So because of that, there is no overflow and it has parsed successfully. Okay, so I'm gonna make this a non-numeric value. Okay. So again, there is no error at compile time, but there will be an error at runtime when we run our program. So I'm sorry, by using a Typeforce method, you will get no error, but you will get only the Boolean value that is false. So is it parsed successfully? It is false. So that has not been converted and the converted value is 0 because we have typed in a non-numeric value. So now let's check and assign this value 1 null value. So let's check what will be the output by running our program. So I'm just going to run the program. So is it parsed successfully? It's false and the converted value is 0. Again, you cannot work with, oh, I'm sorry, it is always safe to use the Triforce method in these three scenarios because if you're using the parse method or the convert class, we were getting some errors or issues. So we use the Triforce method because if these two values are not convertible, then it simply returns false and the out variable is assigned the default value of the target type. So, and by seeing that default value, we can always correct it. So, or in simpler words, by seeing the return value, we can see if these two values are parsed successfully or not. And we can take the appropriate actions and if it is not parsed successfully. So that's it for this video, guys. If you like this video, don't forget to like and share this video. Please subscribe to my channel for more. Goodbye till the next video.